Over the last 20 years, South African taxpayers have contributed towards the greater good of the country. But more recently, there's been a decline in tax compliance. To discuss this, we're joined in studio by Head of Business Development at Bravura, Ian Matthews. Ian, tax compliance has become quite a problem in South Africa, and why are we seeing this decline?
Matteo, I think the Minister in his budget speech gave us, I think, a good indication as to why that might be. For example, he mentioned in his speech that taxpayers' commitment to maintaining tax compliance is very much dependent on a sense of participation and also a sense of that the money is going and is being utilized for the benefit of the community at large. After the 1994 election, I think corporate South Africa in particular and the country as a whole bought into the story. The last, say, 7-8 years, people have become doubtful as to whether their tax dollar is actually making a difference, and in fact concerned that the tax dollar is actually being utilized for purposes not for the benefit of the community at large. So in that regard, for example, I think the Minister also mentioned in his speech that the top 16 government corporations had a return on capital of negative about 2 years ago, which at the end of the day makes people believe or lose faith in where the money is going.
Are we seeing this from the corporate sector as well? I mean, with business confidence quite low and business trying to work with government on all these roadshows, but are we seeing them, also stepping back and saying, well, we're not going to be paying tax as a form of revolt?
Well, I don't think it's a question of a form of revolt. It's just thinking about what is the best possible outcome for business. And it's less about tax morality. I think it's just a sense of where do I get the best return on my investment? And that's why you're seeing so much of corporate South Africa today investing offshore, which is bad for South African finances, because that means money is being invested in projects in countries outside of South Africa, with the result that the government is not earning taxes on the profits being generated in those other countries.
Can we say, the corporate sector is investing in bad faith? If they're taking their money elsewhere, even in terms of taxes, because we've seen the government say the corporate sector is having an investment strike. If they're having a tax strike, isn't that playing against the economy in the country?
No, I think it's just a case of, at the end of the day, they need to ensure that they get the best possible return for the investors. If they don't get the best possible return, investors will just move on and actually disinvest from the country even further. So they have a responsibility to their shareholders, and they need to look for the best possible outcome with the lowest possible risk.
And we're currently at a shortfall of about 30 billion rand. If more and more companies step away from investing in South Africa in forms of tax anyway, how much more work does Treasury have to do in order to balance our budget?
I think the biggest concern in that sense is that if the faith or the belief in the South African story isn't bolstered and built over the next couple of years, I think business will ultimately become less inclined to invest in South Africa and look for opportunities beyond our borders, which by definition is bad for the country.
Surely we can have some sort of talk between a government and the corporate sector, and I'm worried about the corporate sector more because their corporate tax is at 28%, so it really does count in terms of our fiscus. So can they at least approach government to say, maybe these are the things that we're not happy with, and should we want to invest more money, here's what you need to do?
I think business has engaged with government quite extensively over the last year or so. In particular, I think the whole Team South Africa concept, where business participated in the selling of the story of South Africa to investors offshore. A number of the top businessmen in the country participated in those roadshows, trying to tell a story of South Africa, which is a good investment destination. I think events, to a certain extent, over the last couple of months has undermined that, and to some extent undermined confidence in the sector. Recently, I think in the last couple of days, saw that cash holdings by corporate SA is at the all-time high right now, with the result that it tells you that the money is not being invested.
And in terms of the South African government, can they regulate that the corporate sector is forced to pay the tax, even though they don't believe that it's not going to the right place?
Well, no, I think taxes are payable as appropriate in terms of the legislation as it stands, and I think corporate South Africa is complying with its obligations. It's just a question ultimately of whether there's not a better jurisdiction or better opportunities elsewhere. and that's what's causing some of the